The emergency meeting was called by the time the sun rose over Hard Rock Stadium. The decision had been made. Alex Eala would be banned. Not for doping, not for misconduct, not for anything she had done on the court. The 20-year-old Filipina, whose jersey sales had accounted for of all merchandise at the Miami Open, whose presence had crashed ticket systems and packed stadiums, was being suspended for what she wore. The Nike jersey that had broken every sales record in tournament history. The jersey featuring the samp, the national flower of the Philippines that had become a symbol of Filipino pride overnight, was now the reason the WTA was taking action. The organization's uniform regulations, the same rules that had sparked the patch wars of the 1990s that had pitted Nike against Adidas in a decade-long battle over logos. Alexandria, from Philippines. Brazilian tennis fans, we're curious to see you playing here. And you just had a great performance tonight. Are there more exhibitions like this to come? Sorry. What do you mean by exhibitions? Like the tournaments? No. What do you mean? Sorry. Are there more exhibitions like this? The performance like this? Oh, well. Here in Brazil. Well, this is my first time in Brazil. And my first time in South America, actually. So, I'm so happy to see that, the crowd is so lively and I didn't expect, so many people to come out and watch me play. I guess I was a bit lucky to be sandwiched in between two great Brazilians. So no, I'm just so happy to be here and to be able to play well. The numbers were still being counted when the WTA made its decision. Alex Eala's jersey had already sold out within hours of its release. Pre-orders alone crashed the Nike website twice. From Manila to Dubai to Los Angeles, Filipino fans rushed to claim a piece of history. By the end of the Miami Open, the figures were undeniable. Eala's jersey accounted for of all merchandise sold at the tournament, more than every other player combined. The biggest names in the sport couldn't match it. Coco Gauff, IGA, Swiatek, Arena Sabalenka. Together, they sold less than Eala alone. The demand wasn't limited to merchandise. Ticket systems collapsed the moment sales opened, overwhelmed by fans eager to see her play. Every match featuring Eala sold out within hours. In contrast, the finals without her would never reach full capacity. The jersey itself became a symbol. A clean white base accented with subtle Sagitta-inspired patterns along the collar and sleeves. The colors of the Philippine flag lined the trim while the Nike swoosh stood boldly on the chest. It was more than sports gear. It was identity, pride, and history woven into fabric. Fans didn't just wear it to matches. They wore it to school, to work, to gatherings, anywhere Filipinos came together to celebrate their rising icon. For Nike, it wasn't just a success. It was a phenomenon. The brand had spent years building Alexa into more than just an ambassador. From the custom Samper-inspired hair tie she debuted at Wimbledon to the portrait installations at Nike's Oregon headquarters, she had been treated as a creative partner, not merely an endorser. Now, with jersey sales shattering records, that investment was paying off beyond even Nike's expectations. But where Nike saw triumph, the WTA saw a problem. They saw a jersey that violated uniform regulations, a swoosh larger than what was permitted, design elements that extended beyond the allowed fashion zones, and in their view, a player who had crossed a line, one that no amount of commercial success could justify. The WTA's uniform rules had been controversial since their introduction in the 1990s. They were meant to preserve balance, to prevent any single manufacturer from dominating the sport's visual identity, to ensure sponsor visibility, and to maintain a consistent professional look across the tour. But from the very beginning, exceptions undermined that balance, and those exceptions fueled decades of conflict. In the 1990s, the so-called patch wars erupted when Venus Williams refused to wear the WTA sponsor patch on a Reebok dress at the US Open. The tour responded with fines and threats of further sanctions. Yet, the real controversy lay elsewhere. Nike had secured an exemption. Its players were not required to wear the patch, a concession that rival brands saw as blatant favoritism. The tension carried into the 2000s when Nike and Adidas clashed over a deceptively simple question. What counts as a logo? Adidas maintained that its signature 3 stripes along the sleeves were a design element, fashion, not branding. Critics, including Nike, argued otherwise. The dispute escalated beyond tennis. The International Olympic Committee ultimately ruled that the 3 stripes constituted a logo, forcing Adidas to comply with strict size limitations. On the tennis courts, however, the fight never truly ended. Both the ATP and the WTA were left repeatedly revisiting their rules, trying to define the line between expression and regulation, between identity and uniformity. Now with YA at the center of a global phenomenon, that unresolved tension had finally come to a head. At the Grand Slams, the restrictions were even tighter. Under the International Tennis Federation (ITF) rulebook, sponsor logos had to remain minimal. No single mark could exceed 2 square in. The margin for expression was razor thin, and enforcement could be unforgiving. At the 2025 French Open, American player Haley Baptiste experienced that scrutiny firsthand. Moments before her third-round match, she was pulled aside by officials. Her Nike headband logo was deemed too large. The Jumpman logo on her arm sleeve was also flagged. She was eventually allowed to compete, but only after turning the sleeve inside out and receiving a one-time exception for the headband. For players and manufacturers, the inconsistency was maddening. As tennis legend Martina Navratilova once wrote, the rules often felt less like standards and more like shifting boundaries, applied unevenly and interpreted differently depending on the moment. And now the numbers the WTA seemed determined to overlook were impossible to ignore. When Alex played, stadiums were full. When she exited, they emptied. After her 4th-round departure, ticket sales collapsed, plummeting by 63%. The semi-finals and final were played in half-empty arenas. Broadcast partners quietly threatened to scale back coverage. Sponsors pushed for refunds. What should have been the most profitable Miami Open history instead reported significant losses. There had been only one bright spot. YA's jersey accounting for of all merchandise revenue. It was an unprecedented phenomenon. Demand surged so intensely that a secondary market emerged where even otherwise unwanted tickets gained value simply because of her presence. Filipino fans who had traveled across continents wore her jersey with pride, transforming the tournament into something larger than sport, a celebration of identity, unity, and national pride. And yet the WTA's decision to ban Ya threatened to unravel even that. The fans who had filled the stadiums, who had crashed ticket systems, who had turned the Miami Open into a global spectacle, were not about to accept the ban quietly. Within hours of the announcement, the hashtag #LetAlaPlay was trending worldwide. From Manila to Dubai to Los Angeles, Filipino communities mobilized. Boycotts of WTA events were organized almost overnight. What had already been a financial disaster now threatened to spiral into something far worse. The irony was impossible to ignore. The Women's Tennis Association had spent years trying to grow the game, expanding into new markets and searching for stars who could fill stadiums and capture global attention. And they had found one. The problem was their biggest star didn't fit the mold. She wasn't ranked in the top 40. She hadn't won a Grand Slam. And now she was being banned for wearing a jersey that celebrated her heritage. The very organization that should have been celebrating her rise was punishing her for it. Behind the scenes, the locker room was in turmoil. Players who had only weeks earlier questioned the attention Ya received were now rallying behind her. The divide that once seemed unbridgeable was closing fast. United by a growing sense that something had gone too far. Even rivals stepped forward. Coco Gauff, who had been involved in a tense tunnel exchange with Ya just days before, was among the first to speak out. "This is ridiculous," she wrote on social media. Alex did nothing wrong. She wore a jersey her fans loved. If the WTA has a problem with the rules, change the rules. Don't punish the player who brought millions of new fans to our sport. Sabalenka, still dealing with her own frustrations after being overlooked in favor of Roger Federer at a recent event, set them aside without hesitation. This was bigger than rankings, bigger than rivalries. For the first time in years, the locker room stood united and the WTA was no longer just facing one player. It was facing everyone. "I don't agree with this decision," she said in a statement. "Alex is the biggest draw in women's tennis. She sells out stadiums. She brings new audiences to our sport. Banning her is not the answer." Jessica Pagula, who had experienced the AY effect firsthand during their semi-final clash at the 2025 Miami Open, was even more direct. "The WTA needs to get its priorities straight," she told reporters. "We have a player who is doing more to grow this sport than any marketing campaign, and instead of celebrating her, they're punishing her. It doesn't make sense." Even the legends stepped in. Billie Jean King, founder of the Women's Tennis Association, added her voice to the growing backlash, underscoring just how far the controversy had spread. But nowhere was the reaction stronger than within the Filipino community. They had followed Ya's journey from junior tournaments to the global stage. To them, this wasn't just a ruling. It was personal. Within hours of the announcement, protests formed outside WTA headquarters. Headlines blazed across Philippine media. "Let her play." Social media erupted with hashtag "Let a Yellow Play" trending worldwide for 3 consecutive days. In Manila, thousands gathered at the Rizal Memorial Tennis Center, the very courts where Ya had first picked up a racket. They came wearing her jersey. They waved Philippine flags. They chanted her name. What had started as a uniform violation had become something far bigger. It was no longer just about rules. It was about identity, pride, and a global movement that refused to be ignored. The scene repeated itself across the world. In Dubai, in Los Angeles, in London, wherever Filipinos had gathered to watch their hero rise, they now gathered to protest. The economic impact was immediate. Sponsors who had been on the verge of partnering with the Women's Tennis Association began to pull back. Broadcast partners voiced concerns about the organization's stability. What had already been a damaging financial situation now threatened to become a full-scale crisis. The WTA had miscalculated. They believed fans would accept the ban, that they would stay loyal to the sport even without her. They were wrong. The fans hadn't come for tennis. They had come for Alex. And without her, they simply stopped watching. As the controversy intensified, Alex Eala remained silent. She had left Miami after her 4th-round loss to Karolina Muchova. Her ranking slipped from number 29 to number 45. Her struggles against Czech opponents continued, her record falling to 0-13. She should have been preparing for the clay season, the Lindt Open, Madrid Open, Italian Open, and ultimately the French Open. Instead, she found herself at the center of a global firestorm she had never asked for. And then the turning point came. The ban was overturned. The pressure from fans, from players, from sponsors, from the media, had become impossible to ignore. The WTA, facing mounting losses and a united backlash, had no choice but to reverse its decision. Alexia would be allowed to play. She would step onto the court wearing her jersey, its sampita patterns intact, the swoosh unchanged, and every detail that had turned it into a symbol of Filipino pride still visible to the world. But the damage had already been done. The Women's Tennis Association had lost something far more valuable than control over a dress code. Its credibility was shaken, trust between the organization and its players had fractured, and a 20-year-old who had done nothing more than compete and inspire had become the most powerful symbol of resistance in the sport. As you turned toward the clay season, toward Madrid Open,